Hello, it is April 11th, and I'm Dan Estrada. This is Engineering Ethics at NJIT. We're on lesson 12, so let's jump into the course here. Here we go. So we're on lesson 12. This is the first lesson in our artificial intelligence unit. I put up my lecture online. Lecture is about an hour, and I go over, a lot of what's in the Prezi. So the Prezi has the lecture word. You can find it in there. The lesson this week is mostly just to introduce artificial intelligence, to introduce some concepts in machine learning, to talk about neural networks and so on. I introduced the Turing test in the video. We can maybe talk a little bit more about the Turing test and Lovelace objection today, if you all have questions. I also wanted to maybe introduce a couple of robots that we might want to talk about. Again, this is the first lesson in our artificial intelligence unit. We're going to be doing this for the next 3 weeks. So this week is the sort of introduction to the philosophy of artificial intelligence. Next week, we go into robotics and autonomy, in particular autonomous weapon systems and autonomous vehicles, autonomous drones. That's lesson next week. The week after that, lesson 14, is for technological unemployment. What happens to our jobs? What happens to the economy when robots take all of our jobs? So we'll do that in lesson 14. And that's the last full lecture for the course. We're back on a normal schedule now. So we have this assigned reading, we have a normal lecture. Some of these are required readings, and then you'll have a regular quiz. The quiz this week is drawn from these NOVA documentaries. So this is just a normal week like we used to do before the research project. Before we get any more into the content this week, let me say some things about the research project. I'm still in the middle of grading everyone's projects, and I appreciate your patience going through all the reports and the plagiarism check and so on. I had a lot of students email me concerned about the plagiarism check for lesson 11. A lot of students didn't turn in the plagiarism check on time, and I didn't have the flag set to allow students to turn in late work on the plagiarism check. So you can do that now. I've just changed these flags so you can go in and submit. If you didn't submit it on time, you can still submit your plagiarism check for lesson 11. Remember, I'd like you to turn in the full report with your full annotated bibliography for the plagiarism check. If you didn't turn it in on time, but you did turn in the Moodle thing on time, if your Moodle post is on time, then I'm not going to mark you down. Just turn in the plagiarism check as soon as you can. So I got a lot of emails about that over the weekend, and I just fixed that. So yeah, you should be able to submit for lesson 11 plagiarism check. I've also fixed the quiz for this week. The lecture secret word should now work. I guess I'll just tell you right now that the Hangout secret word is going to be hitchBOT. hitchBOT. hitchBOT with an H. I suppose I can talk about hitchBOT a little bit. I want to introduce a few other robots that I wasn't able to talk about very many robots in the lecture. So I want to show a couple of robots in the Hangout here. Yeah, I'm sorry about that typo. It was an accident. But before I get any deeper into the content, before I introduce you to hitchBOT and some of these other robots, let me see if there's any questions that people have about the course content, about the research projects from last week, or anything like that. I'm still in the middle of grading, so I guess there's not a whole lot to talk about, but I just wanted to give some room if anyone had any questions or thoughts before we jump in? Mock asks if I'm done grading week 10. I'm not. I'm still in the middle of grading week 10. I've done it for some of the classes, but I haven't completed week 10 yet. So I'm a little behind. Week 10 and hopefully the whole research project should be done by the end of this week. If there's no other questions, I guess we can jump into some of the material here. So in the Prezi, I go over what it means to be a computer. I go over what it means to be a finite state machine. In the lecture, I spent a lot of time talking about the history of computation and especially the history of artificial intelligence. One of my big concerns in the lecture is to introduce the AI winter, which is something that a lot of people don't remember or know that we went through. The AI winter was a period of about 40 years where AI research just was not well funded. So AI sort of exploded on the scene in the 1950s. There were some early successes in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Some really big successes that made the field quite popular for a few decades. But then the hype bubble burst and funding withdrew, largely because they couldn't make good on a lot of their claims and predictions. And in fact, the AI field was characterized for a long time with people, these are the top people in the field, Herbert Simon, Martin Minsky. These are very well-respected AI people. And they were making these predictions about the capacities of artificial intelligence that just weren't warranted. And as these predictions stopped, as it was clear that these predictions were never going to come true, people started being skeptical of AI, and there was a huge funding shortage for about 40 years, from the 70s all the way until about 2010. We're just coming out of the AI winter now. We've entered the second golden age of AI right now. This started maybe in 2010 or thereabouts, really with the bringing of artificial intelligence services to the mobile phone market. Android did this best, and Google has been doing a lot of work hiring some of the really good people in AI right now. Jeff Hinton is one of these people who's done a lot of work developing artificial neural networks. So I wanted to give just a little bit of background on the history of AI. I talked very briefly in the lecture about what thinking is, but this is really just to set up the Turing test. Turing test is a test for intelligence of computers. And Turing's idea is that if you want to test whether a computer can think, what you want to do is talk to it, see if it can hold a conversation. And if it can hold a conversation that's just like any human would hold, then we should consider the computer intelligent, because after all, this is how we judge human intelligence. If a human can engage you in a conversation where it seems from the conversation that the person's intelligent, then you judge the person to be intelligent. That doesn't mean that you know how their brain works. That doesn't mean that you can see inside their mind, or you know what their feelings are or their emotions are. Right? You can't do that for even other people. You can't see inside their heads. So the fact that you can't see inside a computer's head shouldn't itself be enough to say that it's not thinking. Right? So Turing's idea is that engage it in a conversation, talk to it, and if it engages you back the way that you would expect from an intelligent agent, then we should also consider the machine intelligent. Turing calls this argument fair play for machines. He says fair play must be given to the machines. That's the secret word for the lecture, by the way. Turing says fair play must be given to the machines. By fair play, he doesn't mean that we should think that all machines are intelligent. Some machines aren't intelligent. What Turing means by fair play is that we should use the same criteria to judge the intelligence of the machine as we use to judge the intelligence of human beings. Right? That if we use different criteria to judge the intelligence of the machine, then it's a result of prejudice against the machine, that we're biased against machines. So that even when a machine performs well at a task that we would consider intelligent in a human being, then, right, even when a machine does well at a task that we consider intelligent in a human being, we still don't consider the machine intelligent, right? So I don't think I pulled it. I talk about this in the lecture, but I don't think I pulled up any slides on this. This is Deep Blue versus Kasparov. Yeah. So that's Garry Kasparov. Garry Kasparov was a chess grandmaster, one of the greatest chess players who have ever lived. He's still alive. He's retired now. And maybe some of the younger chess players are even better than Kasparov. But when Kasparov was at his peak, he was a grandmaster, and everyone believed that Kasparov was one of the best chess players alive. Kasparov could beat everyone else at chess. All the other grandmasters he would play at chess, he would beat in the tournaments. He would do these exhibition matches where he would play multiple grandmasters at the same time, like 3 chessboards on a table, the grandmaster behind each chessboard, and he's making one move per board, moving down the line. And right, Kasparov could play 3 grandmasters at the same time and beat all 3. He was a phenomenal chess player. In the early days of the internet, in the early 90s, you could go to a website where it was Kasparov versus the world. So anyone could log onto this website and then vote on what the next move would be in a game against Kasparov. And then it would take all the votes and tabulate them together. And then so the most popular move from everyone in the world would be the next move against Kasparov. And so Kasparov would play the entire world chess. And Kasparov kicked the world's ass. It wasn't even close. When you have a democratic voting system like that, the system tends to make the safest moves. It's not going to take the really risky, aggressive moves. It's going to make the safe, predictable moves. And Kasparov knew exactly what to do with those safe, predictable moves. And so Kasparov was able to literally beat everyone in the world at chess. In 1996 and then 1997, IBM built this machine. This is Deep Blue. Deep Blue was a specialty purpose supercomputer designed entirely to play chess. It was an engineering feat. Deep Blue was calculating something like 1 billion moves a second. Let me tell you a little bit about how chess works. Yeah, I guess this is good enough. That doesn't really... yeah, I guess this is okay. So Deep Blue is a chess playing computer. Let me explain a little bit about how Deep Blue plays chess. Let me say some things about chess first. So I didn't go through this a whole lot in the lecture. So if anyone has any questions they'd like to talk about. If you don't know how to play chess, this is what a chessboard looks like. There's 16 pieces on each side, white and black. For the first move, white goes first, and white can move any of these pawns, either 1 space or 2 spaces. It can also move the horsey, either here or here, and then this horsey can move either here or here. So there's 8 pawns, it can move 1 or 2 spaces, so that's 16 moves, and then each horse has two moves. So there's a total of 20 moves. So there's 20 possible moves that white can make in its first step of this game. So if you imagine drawing a tree, I'm trying to find a good tree. Yeah, so this is a little bit how you would program up a chess playing computer like this. Yeah. So imagine here at the top is the starting state of chess, right? This is what the chessboard looks like when you start. And then there are 20 possible moves that white can make as the first move. So imagine we're building a tree where the top node of the tree is the starting state. And then the next layer of this tree are all the possible states that white can move. So there's 20 possible moves, so there's 20 possible states in this next layer. And so white can move 20 spaces. There's 20 possible moves for white, and there's 20 possible moves for black in response. Black and white can't interact on the first move, so black has the same number of responses in return. So for every one of these 20 moves that white can make, black can make 20 moves in response. So you might imagine that if we're building this sort of chess tree, that there's 20 moves in this first layer, and then the next layer, for each node in the first layer, there's 20 moves that black can respond. So that's 20 times 20 in just the first move for white and black in chess. That's 20 times 20, it's 400 possible moves in just the first move. The average chess game lasts about 35 moves, and chess can, it can in principle go a lot longer than that, but an average game lasts about 35, 40 moves. So 400 possible moves for each move, and then 35 or 40 moves total. This is a huge search space to look through. If you were to actually build the entire chess search tree so that you sort of mapped out every move in the chess tree and built the whole tree, there would be more possible. So if you built this whole tree of all the possible games of chess, there would be more possible games of chess in this tree than there are atoms in the universe. The number I usually see is 10 to the 120, 10 to the 120 possible games of chess. And there's something like 10 to the 80 atoms in the universe. So this is a huge, huge number of games of chess. And the field of possible games of chess is much bigger than you could encode into the machine. Right? There's more possible games of chess than there are atoms in the universe. And that means that if you were to encode a game of chess per atom, you would run out of atoms before you run out of games of chess. What this means is that it's impossible for Deep Blue to know perfectly what the best move is. It can't know in advance what the best move is. There's too many possible moves for it to know with certainty what the best move is. Chess is just too big of a game. There's too many possibilities for Deep Blue to know what the best move is in a game. This isn't true for all games. Some games are solved game. There's some games that are called solved. A solved game is one that you can predict the winning plays from any position. Right? So you know how the game is going to end up if every player plays perfectly from any given position. Right? So we have some games that are solved. Checkers is solved. In other words, we've played through every possible game of checkers. Checkers is also really big. It's not nearly as big as the game of chess, but there's something like 10 to the 14 possible games of checkers. And we've played through every single one of those games of checkers. And so we have computers that can play the perfect game of checkers, never make a mistake. And the perfect game of checkers should end in a draw. So we know that the game of checkers is fair because it's possible for both players to end in a draw. Maybe the easiest one is tic-tac-toe. Tic-tac-toe is solvable. If you're over 5 years old, or if you're over 10 years old, you should never lose tic-tac-toe. You should always be able to draw a game of tic-tac-toe. If you go to XKCD, they have the full map of all the tic-tac-toe games. So here's all the moves for red. Here's all the moves, all the moves for X and all the moves for O mapped out. This isn't every single possible game of tic-tac-toe, but this is all the best moves for tic-tac-toe for each player. And this tells you, if you go through all the possible games, that you've that it should always end in a draw. This is how X can always make sure it ends in a draw. This is how O can always make sure it ends in a draw. So we've played through every game of tic-tac-toe. We've solved tic-tac-toe. We've played through every game of checkers. We've solved checkers. You can't play through every game of chess. It's just too big. So what that means is that when Deep Blue is playing chess, it has to calculate out what it's doing. It has to figure out what the next move is. And you don't know in advance what that might be because there's no perfect predictor about what the best move is. So Deep Blue has to make a judgment. It has to make a judgment call. And that call might be wrong. Or it might not make the best move because it might not have calculated out enough. So what that means is that so Deep Blue is building this big chess tree. The tree is way too big for it to fill out the tree entirely. So Deep Blue has to make decisions about which parts of this tree to search. So there's 20 possible moves that white can make in the first layer, but maybe only 5 of those moves are any good. And the other 15 moves are all really bad moves that you should never do. So Deep Blue, instead of looking at all 20 of these moves, Deep Blue says, look, I'm only gonna look at these 5 moves and the other 15 I'm just gonna ignore. And this is how Deep Blue goes through this big search tree. The search tree itself is too big to look at every case. So it has to make smart decisions about how to prune the tree and only focus in on where the interesting strategies lie. And those are decisions, those are judgment calls that could be wrong. So the strength of Deep Blue as a chess player is really about the strength of whether its search of this tree is smart enough to beat its human opponent. People have been building chess computers for a long time. Turing had a chess computer. He tried to build a chess playing program back in the 1950s. It didn't work very well. And people have argued several times, right up to this final match between Kasparov and Deep Blue. People have argued that the strategic capacities of the human brain are just too clever and too complex for us to accurately compete with in a computer. Our computers have this very strict way of calculating answers, and it doesn't have the pattern matching or the sort of complex abstract reasoning skills that human beings do. So people have been trying to build chess playing computers for a long time, but people have been skeptical that we'll ever be able to do it for just as long. And people would argue up before this match between Kasparov and Deep Blue, people would argue that computers would never beat a human being in chess. Humans are just too clever and too smart. Like I said, people have built chess playing computers before, and they've always been not so good. Making sort of very predictable moves. If you know the moves that the computer is going to make, then you can anticipate it and defeat it. Kasparov had gotten pretty good at this. He had been asked to play chess playing computers quite a lot, being a professional chess superstar. He had been asked to play these chess playing computers, and he had done several exhibition matches against these computers. In 1996, he played a version of Deep Blue. Deep Blue won 2 of the games, but it lost 4 of the games. So Kasparov won the tournament. And even before this, IBM had an earlier version of this computer called Deep Thought, and Kasparov was able to pretty easily beat Deep Thought. But Deep Blue was this sort of engineering leap forward. I think Deep Thought was calculating 1 million moves a second, and Deep Blue was calculating 1 billion moves a second. It was a supercomputer. Right? 1 billion moves a second, looking at 1 billion different cases in this massive search tree. But because of the way that the computers prune these search trees, so it's only looking at some cases and not others, Kasparov's strategy was just, you play weird games that you wouldn't usually play against a human, but the goal is to get the computer out of its comfort zone. If you start playing moves that the computer just doesn't know how to deal with, then you might get an advantage. Kasparov was able to play these kinds of games and still maintain his advantage. This is how he beat Deep Blue the first time. After Kasparov beat Deep Blue the first time, he said in a press conference afterwards, look, the computer is very, very fast. It's able to do a whole lot of calculations, but it's probably not going to beat me at chess anytime soon. After this first 1986 match, Kasparov says, probably not within my lifetime will we see a computer beat a grandmaster at chess. So IBM asked Kasparov for a rematch the next year, 1997, May 11th, 1997. If you're looking for a date the computers took over the world, it was May 11th, 1997, when Kasparov lost to Deep Blue, 3.5 to 2.5. Let's go through the game. Here we go. Yeah, so the 1997 rematch here. The first game, Kasparov wins pretty easily. Kasparov uses the same sort of strategy that he always uses against these computers, and he beats Deep Blue pretty easily. Again, after this first game of this 1997 rematch, Kasparov again says, look, probably not within my lifetime will we see a computer beat a human being. Computers are just not thinking in the right way to compare to human thought. And then game 2 comes around. And game 2 is a critical match. Deep Blue wins game 2, and it shakes Kasparov. There's 3 more draws, and then Deep Blue wins 1 more, and this is the end of the tournament. But it's the second game that really matters. And in the second game, Deep Blue plays a very clever move. A move where Deep Blue sacrifices its queen, but for better board position. The queen is the most powerful piece on the chessboard. Right? The queen can do the most things on the chessboard. So sacrificing the queen is a big risk. But Deep Blue takes this risk. Deep Blue puts its queen in a compromised position. And by doing so, Deep Blue is able to gain control of the board and goes on to win the game. And the thing is that Kasparov doesn't believe that Deep Blue could have made this move. After the second game here, in the press conference afterwards, instead of congratulating Deep Blue, Kasparov demanded to see Deep Blue's logs. He's like, look, a computer couldn't have made that move. It was too clever of a move. It's not the kind of move that a computer can make. Not that it's an impossible move to see. A grandmaster, Kasparov said, if there was a grandmaster, a professional chess player who's looking at the board, they might be able to see that that's the right move. And maybe they went behind the scenes and tweaked Deep Blue in the background and made Deep Blue make that move. But Kasparov was convinced that a computer could never have found that move on its own. Kasparov was essentially accusing IBM of running a Mechanical Turk. You might know Mechanical Turk from Amazon, but the original Mechanical Turk was a chess-playing machine. Here's Mechanical Turk. So chess is the game of kings. Right? It's a strategy game. It's kind of like war. Kings and rulers of various countries love to play chess. The thing about playing chess with a king is that the kings don't like to lose. And if you beat a king too bad, he might cut off your head. So, kings like to play chess, but people don't like to play king's chess because kings might turn out to be sore losers. In particular, Napoleon loved to play chess and fancied himself a great chess player. Napoleon wasn't really that good of a chess player. The problem was just that no one wanted to beat Napoleon because if Napoleon lost, he would throw a big fit and it wouldn't be fun. So people would throw games. They would play Napoleon and they would intentionally lose just to make Napoleon feel happy. The point, though, is that Napoleon comes to believe of himself that he's a great chess player when in fact he's not. And so people don't like this and they want to sort of show Napoleon that he's not the great chess player he thinks he is. And so they build what's called the Mechanical Turk. So this is the Mechanical Turk. It's claimed to be a chess-playing machine. Right? You're not playing against a human, you're playing against this device. And look, you open it up and you can see inside and there's all these gears and levers and pulleys and so on. And the idea is that you set up the chessboard and then it actually plays chess. But the Mechanical Turk isn't real. This is in the 1700s when they didn't have technology like this at all. What's really going on in the Mechanical Turk is there's a dude inside who's playing chess for the machine. And you just hide the dude so it looks like it's the machine playing when in fact it's a person. Right, so the Mechanical Turk is not really a machine playing chess, it's really a person playing chess that just looks like a machine. And this is what Kasparov accused IBM of after the second game. that it wasn't really the computer making the move, it was a human being making that decision. Because the move was too clever for a computer to make. This is Kasparov's argument. And he demanded to see the logs. I don't know that the logs have ever actually come out, and we've been able to look at them. But it doesn't matter whether Deep Blue was being rigged, because now there's no question that you can go buy off-the-shelf software and run it on your laptop, and that software can beat the best grandmasters in the world. There's no doubt that our chess-playing computers are orders of magnitude better than the best human players. In fact, there's really no point in having human chess tournaments anymore, because the computers will beat the humans every time. They still have human tournaments, and they also have computer tournaments to find the best computer chess player. One of the popular chess playing computers is Fritz, and nowadays when they do chess tournaments for both humans and machines, they usually have Fritz watching the game and giving its own analysis of the game, sort of alongside the commentators. So I'm going through the Kasparov case in some detail just because it's a fun story, but also because the pattern here has been repeated several times, right? So Kasparov is our best chess player. We consider chess playing to be an intelligent activity. So we want to see if we can get our computers to play chess also. Now, I want to link this to the Turing test, to the fair play for machines from Turing, right? Turing says that we ought to evaluate our machines on the same standards that we use to evaluate human beings. So human beings judge Garry Kasparov to be intelligent, partly because of how well he plays chess, right? Because he plays chess so well, we consider Kasparov to be intelligent. Some people call him a genius. So if playing chess well is the standard for judging Kasparov to be intelligent, Deep Blue plays better chess than Kasparov. Deep Blue can beat Kasparov at chess. So if playing chess well is Kasparov's claim to intelligence, then maybe we should also consider Deep Blue intelligent, because look, Deep Blue passes that same test with flying colors. Of course, Deep Blue only plays chess, and so one natural response is to say, well, it's not just playing chess well, but you got to do other things besides playing chess, right? Deep Blue can't. There's lots of other things that Deep Blue can't do, including other formal things like certain kinds of mathematics. Deep Blue might not be able to do. What Deep Blue can do is play chess. That's about all it can do, and you might think that that's not enough to be intelligent. But there's an aspect of this that's shifting the goalposts. I mean, before Deep Blue beat Kasparov, we did consider playing chess to be an intelligent thing, and it was a goal to build a computer to play chess, and people were convinced that you could never do it because the human mind was too unique, and you could never get a machine to replicate that process. But then once we do it, people say, oh, well, I mean, it's just chess. You know, chess isn't that hard. Chess is a very hard game, but it isn't that hard in the sense that it's a formal process. It's almost a mathematical calculation. So since Deep Blue versus Kasparov, there have been other human-computer tournaments that are worth mentioning. The big one was Watson's Jeopardy. So Watson played Jeopardy. So Watson is one of IBM's new computers. This is IBM. Watson is IBM's big entry into the second golden age of AI. And partly as promotion for this big investment into Watson, IBM put Watson in another kind of human-machine challenge, this time against Jeopardy contestants. So the Jeopardy contestants were Ken Jennings and Brad Rutter. Ken Jennings, you might remember, was the person who had the longest winning streak on Jeopardy. He won the most consecutive games. And Brad Rutter was the most winning person on Jeopardy. He won the most money from competing on Jeopardy. So these are two of our best Jeopardy players across all of humanity. Right, two of our best Jeopardy players. And people consider Jeopardy to require intelligence. Right? When Ken Jennings does well at Jeopardy, people called him a really intelligent person. People thought he was really smart. Some people called him a genius. And they call him a genius on the basis of his performance at Jeopardy. So when Watson beats Ken Jennings at Jeopardy, right, when Watson wipes the floor with these human beings, perhaps we should also, yeah, so here the first game ended $4,800 to Jennings, $10,000 to Rudder, and $35,000 to Watson. Right, so he made more than twice what the other two contestants made combined. If we think that doing well at Jeopardy requires intelligence, and look, Jeopardy is a much more challenging problem than chess. Chess, the strategy is complicated, but the moves are all very clear and formal. Jeopardy is much more ambiguous. Jeopardy requires knowing a bunch of trivia and facts, but also being able to do things like understand puns and wordplay, and to be able to associate these things with a sort of vast repertoire of trivia. In order to play Jeopardy, Watson had to be able to interpret the question and then search its databases for meaningful answers to that question. Right? Watson didn't know what the questions would be in advance, and Watson's memory wasn't set up to answer these questions in particular. It wasn't just pulling from a database what the answers were. Watson had to figure out what the answers were, given its vast array of knowledge. And it had to do that in the same time period in order to buzz in faster than its human opponents. It's a very complicated process. And one of the documentaries for this week, The Smartest Machine on Earth. This is the documentary on Watson. It explains how Watson works, and it goes over the run-up to the Jeopardy match. Strongly recommended that you watch it. So there's one other big, human-machine competition that's worth talking about here, which is AlphaGo's match against Lee Sedol. So this is Go. I remember when Kasparov lost to Deep Blue, that people were saying of this match, oh, okay, Kasparov loses to Deep Blue, but chess is hard, but it's not that hard. The really hard game is Go. This is Go. To give you a sense of how hard the game of Go is, remember we did the calculation earlier that there were 400 possible moves for white and then black's response in a game of chess. For the first move, there were 400 possible moves. 20 moves for white and then 20 moves for black. In Go starts off with a completely blank board, and it's 19 by 19. And you can put your piece anywhere on that 19 by 19 board. 19 by 19, just to round it, make it 20 by 20. So that's 400 moves just for black. Black plays first in Go. Just for black, just 400 moves for black in the first move. And then white has 400 minus 1 moves in response. So that's 400 squared moves for white and black in the first move of Go. So this is much, much bigger than the game of chess. The rules for how you put pieces on the board in Go is also different. So the extent of this game is just much bigger. The size of the search tree that the AI has to go through is just much, much bigger. So this is move 37. This is from one of the games. Lee Sedol playing AlphaGo. It's timed. And in this commentary, the commentator here is talking about how to respond to this piece. So there's this black piece right here in the middle. Actually, there's a white piece in the middle. And the question is, how should black respond to this white piece? And the commentator at the beginning of this clip is mostly saying that there's no reason to put any black piece right here. But AlphaGo does play a black piece, and you can see that AlphaGo plays the black piece right in that corner. And here's the commentator trying to process what AlphaGo just did. You can see the commentator ends up making a quadruple take or a quintuple take. I think of like 5, not just a triple take, but like a quintuple take. Right here, they're like, that's got to be a mistake. The commentary, they're like, no, that has to be a mistake. A person would never put a piece there. They would put a piece down here, but never right next to that white piece. It's just a weird move. So this is move 37 from the game, match 2. And the commentators on this game describe it as an inhuman move. Humans don't make this move. I've never seen a human make a play like that before. It's so beautiful, so beautiful. This was the characteristic story from this AlphaGo match, that over and over and over, what you saw AlphaGo doing was making plays that no human being would have ever made in that position. And all of the top Go players were watching this game just dumbfounded because they had never seen these moves played before, and they were really brilliant moves. And so all of the Go commentators watching this are just getting awestruck. And to give you a sense of how awestruck these people are, so this is a timed game. You only have a certain amount of time. Sedol, so AlphaGo plays that black piece right there, move 37. It's Sedol's turn. I'll go ahead and turn on music. So this move, it pushes Sedol out of his chair, right? He in a timed game, he has to stand up and walk away. This is how these tournaments end up going, is that the humans sort of dramatically underestimate the capacities of the machine, and the machine just blows away the expectations, performs at a much higher level than we're expecting, and the human beings just get rattled in response, right? Sedol walks away. Kasparov ends up going on this rant, this sort of paranoid rant about cheating and so on. For what it's worth, Sedol, it was a best of 7, and Sedol lost 4 matches and won only 1 match. I think he won game 4. Yeah, game 4, Sedol's God move. Sedol ends up spending like 30 minutes just thinking about this one move, and ends up playing a very counterintuitive move in move 38. But it's this one move that throws AlphaGo off and allows Sedol to win this one game. So it's very exciting, especially if you know Go, a little bit about Go. These games are exciting. But all of these games are examples where our top performing experts in these fields that used to be characteristically human are being outperformed by our machines. It's a little fun in these board games, but when this stuff is the robot's performing better at your job, and so now you're unemployed, it becomes a little less fun. So we'll be talking about that over the next few weeks. I want to go soon, but let me just talk a little bit about hitchBOT. hitchBOT, one more time, is the word of the day, secret word of the day. So Turing's test is about whether the machine can behave like a human. A lot of people don't like Turing's test because they think that, even if the machine behaves like a human, it's not really intelligent inside. And the point, the defense of Turing here is that we don't know what it's like inside of even other people, but we still judge them intelligent, and the way you judge them as intelligent is by actually interacting with them. So it's in the basis of these interactions that you judge their intelligence. This is one reason why we ought to be playing these games, having these tournaments with these machines, playing these games with machines, right? Because by playing the computer chess or Go or Jeopardy, you get some sense of how intelligent they are, what their capacities are, and how they compare with our own. Right? So these kinds of participatory games to play with the machine. This is right along the lines of Turing's test. In fact, Turing, he doesn't call it the Turing test, he calls it the imitation game. And again, it's a game to be played with the machine in order to assess the performance of the machine. And part of the point of these activities is that drawing out the intelligence of the machine is partly a function of the games that we play with it. In other words, the more intelligent the game that we play, and the more intelligent we engage as a machine, the more intelligence we are able to bring out of the machine. So before we talk about hitchBOT, this is an older, hitchBOT was inspired partly by Tweenbot. Let me move this over here, actually. So Tweenbot is an art project. Yeah, so this is Tweenbot. Tweenbot's a robot, but it's a very simple robot. It's just a little wind-up car. It can only go forward. It can't turn in any direction. It has no sensors, so it doesn't know what's going on around it. It's just this little wind-up car, and it only moves forward. But the wind-up car is put inside this little cardboard robot figure, and the figure has a flag that is hanging up over it. And the flag says, "Help me. My name's my name's Tweenbot. Help me get to the other side." So this is Washington Square Park in New York City. There's no direct path through Washington Square Park from one end to the other. And the roads themselves are full of potholes and walking people and so on. If the robot only goes in a straight line, it's not going to get to the other end of the park. But the question is, will Tweenbot get to the other end of the park? And the thing about Tweenbot is that it's cute enough to attract the assistance of all the people walking around it. Right? So when Tweenbot gets stuck in this curb in this gutter, here's a person right there to set it along its way. Now, Tweenbot eventually does get to the other side of the park after a lot of delays, certainly not the most efficient way of getting to the other side of the park. But it is able to get to the other side of the park, right? It is able to acquire its goal, to accomplish its mission. And its capacity to acquire its mission is not about any intelligence that it has, it's partly about the social system around it. If the system around it is supportive enough, if the system around it is supportive and constructive enough, then even very simple agents can accomplish really complicated things. So I want to say that Tweenbot here has some social intelligence. It has enough intelligence to manipulate its surroundings in order to get it to where it's going. And that's not a trivial task, right? Being able to manipulate, I mean, this is New York City. That's definitely a strange package with electronics inside of it. But people aren't running away in fear. Right? This is post 9/11, but people are not running away in fear. In fact, they're helping it along. Right? So this is what I think fair play for machines is all about, and this is what I think the big criteria for artificial intelligence is. Right? What environment are we putting these machines into, and how do those environments support their operation? So Tweenbot eventually does get to the other side of the park, but it gives a very nice contrast with hitchBOT. So hitchBOT is basically doing the same kind of thing. hitchBOT is not just a little small car. hitchBOT's a much bigger object. You can't see it really well in that picture. So hitchBOT, there's hitchBOT. hitchBOT's just a 5-gallon bucket, white 5-gallon plastic bucket. Those are pool floaties attached to his arms and legs. Obviously, they don't go anywhere or do anything, and hitchBOT can't move around on its own. But it does have some solar panels. It has an LCD display, LED display on top, and it's got an iPhone inside with GPS and to process the display and so on. So it's got some electronics inside, and what the electronics allow it to do is to post to its Instagram and Twitter feed. And the goal of hitchBOT is it's a hitchhiking robot. So it was originally built in Canada, and the goal was to get across Canada in by hitchhiking from one end to the other. So it starts in so it starts on one end. I guess it starts on the East Coast. And then it got 19 different rides over the course of 26 days, and it made it all the way across Canada from east to west over that time. And the way it did it is just by having people pick it up off the side of the road, sort of sticks its thumb out, and it tweets that it's ready to be picked up. And then if someone knows about it and is in the area and comes, picks it up and takes it along its way. And this is how hitchBOT eventually got all the way across Canada. Right? It required the support of the people. It couldn't do it by itself, but it was able to do it with the support of all its people. In the course of doing this, hitchBOT ended up generating it ended up building a community of supporters. Right? There were a bunch of people online who were following hitchBOT's Twitter stream, following hitchBOT's Twitter stream, and supporting it in various ways. So the trip across Canada was successful. It went on to do a trip across the Netherlands and Germany. And then it was scheduled to do a trip across the United States. And this trip failed. So hitchBOT started in Boston. hitchBOT started in Boston, and it made it to Philly, made it to Philadelphia, before it was brutally slain in the streets. And there's this video footage of someone finding hitchBOT, apparently. This is a murder scene. That's right. So this is the person sort of ripping off the arms of the robot. I want to show the, yeah. Here. So the person sort of breaking into, so what you see in this video is this guy sort of doing this sort of street beatdown of this robot, and the aftermath is that the next morning people found hitchBOT in an alley, sort of all torn apart. The iPhone inside was ripped off, the head was ripped off, and it was sort of all torn apart in an alley. Now, it turns out that the people who made this video and posted this video are some YouTube pranksters, where they, they do prank YouTube videos. And so everyone called this video a prank afterwards, but hitchBOT really was destroyed in the streets. And moreover, the prank YouTube people who uploaded the video were also the last people to have picked up hitchBOT. So we know those prank people really did destroy the robot. What was fake was this video. So there's no actual security camera where this video is taken from. They just put a camera up in this spot and took this video. They took this video deliberately. But the video that they took was of a beatdown of the robot. And that ended hitchBOT's trip across the United States. The creators of hitchBOT canceled the project immediately afterwards, so hitchBOT's no more. After hitchBOT was destroyed like this, there was, as you would expect, a big public outcry on the internet. People were like, "Well, why did you have to destroy hitchBOT?" And then there was blowback against that outcry. So here, this is shortly after hitchBOT was slain. Here's this article. hitchBOT was a literal pile of trash and got what it deserved. The impulse here is to say that hitchBOT was destroyed, but that's nonsense. What is the actual consequence to hitchBOT of detaching its parts? What loss of function? What function? It had no function. It was a pile of trash. Providing a cathartic release to some pissed off Eagles fan is about the closest it'll ever come to usefulness. In its violent disassembling, it found briefly and for the first time an actual purpose. So this is people saying, look, hitchBOT doesn't deserve any respect at all. And in fact, it got what it deserved. It deserved to be treated like a pile of trash because that's what it really is. Whew. Okay, so I want to say, and hopefully we talk about this in the forums over the next couple of weeks, I want to say that this is that hitchBOT is the first case of real robot rights. First real case of robot rights where robot rights actually matter. And this isn't because hitchBOT is intelligent or anything like a human. hitchBOT doesn't have any feelings. It's basically just an iPhone. But hitchBOT as a robot was an agent, a participant in a community, and that community cared about the agent, right, cared about the robot, and cared about helping it along in its goals. Look, if I have a teddy bear and I rip that teddy bear to shreds, I haven't really hurt anyone. But if that teddy bear is the favorite teddy bear of a little child, then I've done something wrong to that child by ripping up that teddy bear. Not because the teddy bear feels anything itself, but because that bear was a special object to that child, and I've done something wrong to the child. Well, I want to say that hitchBOT had a special role in a community that cared about it. And by destroying hitchBOT, you're harming that community. And for the sake of that community, I think this kind of beatdown, even if it was just done in jest, it is wrong, is ethically wrong. It's an ethical violation of the robots. This is actually a problem that people, that engineers and designers have become increasingly aware of and worried about. When you put robots in urban environments, people bully those robots, and by bullying, like the video that we saw here, right? The video here, this looks like a street beatdown, right? It looks like a murder scene. Ruben in the chat said this looks like a murder scene. Because this is how you treat people. This isn't usually how you treat objects, right? So everyone knows that in urban environments, you're going to get vandalism and defacement of property and so on. You're going to get people who smash windows and do graffiti and so on. There's a common pattern of behavior to people who destroy property in urban environments, graffiti and other kinds of property damage. But robots in urban environments aren't treated the same way, right? They're not vandalized in the same way. Instead, they're bullied, where bullying has a certain kind of dynamic. The way that bullying works, the way that bullying works in humans is that it's meant to establish social dominance. It's not just about causing pain, but it's the point of a bully is to establish, that the person that you're picking on is weaker and that you're stronger, and they're supposed to establish the social hierarchy. When people vandalize objects, they're not trying to establish that social hierarchy, they're just trying to deface the product. But when people encounter robots in urban environments, they try to establish a social order, so try to establish a social dominant structure, and it takes the form of bullying. So you see people kick and push and shove robots. You don't see people kick and push and shove mailboxes that they put graffiti on, but they do this to robots, and it's the kind of behavior that you see in bullying contexts. Right, so people have this disposition to bully the robots in order to establish this dominant structure, and that's what you see in videos like this. So even though these people were just destroying this robot as a prank, the way they destroy the robot has this sort of bullying performance to it that I think has clear relationships with the issue of robot rights. I think it's the first clear case of robot rights that deserves any serious discussion. I want to close right now by talking about a similar case, but in the other direction. Not people who beat on robots, but people who want to praise robots. So we'll talk about militarized robots in more detail next week. But it's very common and has been for the last decade, over a decade, for robotic units to be coupled with our troops, with our military troops overseas. This is incredibly common. It's been for over a decade, and it's starting to become even more common today with domestic police, that more police outfits in the United States are being equipped with robots. Most of these robots are things like bomb sniffing robots. Right, so this is a bomb sniffing robot. The point of this robot is to have it go on ahead of you, maybe detonate any bombs in the road that are buried in the road, because those kill a lot of soldiers or injure a lot of soldiers. So this robot is supposed to find any IEDs in the road. And it's supposed to, it has cameras and other kinds of sensors to see what's going on ahead of it. So that way you can put the robot in harm's way without exposing any of the soldiers to danger. So we've been using these kinds of robots for a long time. Sometimes these robots are armed and equipped with weapons. But all of the robots that we have today are teleoperated, which means that there's some human being with a remote control telling that robot everything it does. The robots aren't autonomous in the sense that they can do all these things themselves. There's always a human in control. And the current US policy is to have these robots operate with humans immediately in control. So that robot doesn't do anything unless the human operating the joystick tells it to do that. It's firing the weapon or whatever. But these robots are stationed with these troops, and these troops are in very intense circumstances, right? War is a very intense and traumatic space. And because of the intensity of a war environment, soldiers, first of all, form very close bonds with each other, right? The friendship between a troop of soldiers is almost like brothers, or even closer than brothers. Like family, and it's because your life depends on these people to support you, and so you need to have this close and very intimate relationship with these people in order for the whole group to cohere well and operate as a cohesive unit. And that sort of brotherly love, that kinship between the soldiers, gets extended out to their service companions, like the robot. So one of these robots, this is an article, Funeral for Fallen Robots from The Atlantic. And this is talking about Julie Carpenter, who's a researcher who's been looking at the relationship between the soldiers and their robots. And the really interesting thing is that these soldiers have very strong feelings about their robots, very emotional and intimate feelings with these robots, and they want to do well by their robots. So Boomer is one of these robots. It was destroyed in a battlefield in Iraq. After it was destroyed, its troop members gave Boomer full funeral rites. That includes a 21-gun salute, and they awarded the robot with a Purple Heart and a Bronze Star. Purple Heart is for injury in battle, and Bronze Star is for bravery in battle. So a robot has earned these medals. A robot has been awarded a Bronze Heart and a Purple Star. It's been given a 21-gun salute. Right, these are the kinds of things that we do to honor soldiers that are injured or fallen in battle. And we're giving these same honors, exactly these same honors, to the robot involved in the mission. Now, again, this is not saying that the robot is intelligent like a human being, or really that it thinks at all like a human being, that it has feelings, that it feels pain. We're not saying any of that. In fact, for this robot to have earned these medals, it had to have died on the battlefield. So it's earning these battles doesn't mean that it's intelligent. In fact, by hypothesis, it's already dead. Right? It's already decommissioned. It's not non-operational. So saying that Boomer deserves the Bronze Heart and the Bronze Star and the Purple Heart, it deserves these medals not because of any intelligence inside it, but instead because of the role it plays in its social environment, right? Because of the relationship that these people have with this particular object. Right, so just in the same way that we engage in bullying behavior towards robots to establish a social order, we also award robots, right, with these very serious social awards, social recognition, in order to recognize their role in the social order. For what it's worth, we do the same thing with service animals. There are dogs and horses in military units. I think the military also uses dolphins. And sometimes these animals are awarded Bronze Hearts, Purple Hearts and Bronze Stars for their service. Right, so we give these medals to animals. That doesn't mean that those animals are as intelligent as human beings, but it does mean that those animals have an important place in the human world, in the social order. And so by giving these same medals to the robots, we're also recognizing that those robots have a role in social order. And I want to say that they deserve that role, that we ought to treat them in this way, as a matter of fair play. Right? I mean, if we're going to give these medals to dogs and horses, why not give them to robots as well? And more importantly, why shouldn't we recognize the important role that they play in helping our social order function, right? Helping the unit cohere. Right? If you didn't give them these rights, then maybe the soldiers wouldn't develop that close connection with the machine, and then maybe it wouldn't work. Maybe the whole unit wouldn't work as well together. So I want to say that for the sake of the social order, we ought to be treating our machines fairly. So that's my argument for robot rights. I have more arguments like this up on Moodle, and hopefully we can engage in some of these discussions in the next few weeks. Next week, we'll talk more explicitly about military robots and about when or when they shouldn't engage with lethal force. But that'll come up next week. Let me see if there's any questions. Thank you for the 4 people who stuck around for the lecture. Are there any questions or comments or concerns? I'll write the word of the day again in chat. All right, if there are no other comments, I'll go ahead and end the video. Thanks everyone for listening, and I'll see you next week.